This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
There should be a zero tolerance when it comes to workplace bullying. And not just say a zero tolerance when we're talking about that policy, but adhering to it. So if someone is bullying, you say, we do not tolerate this, so we're going to have to terminate you. I'm just so passionate about it because of the fact that it is health harming. So what you're doing is you're harming employees' health when it comes to bullying.
Hello, and welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chilinsky. My guest today is Deitra Payne. She is a speaker, author, presenter, and the founder of Fabulous Coaching, Training, and Productions, where she empowers clients to transform their lives and achieve their dreams. We talked about compassion in leadership through the lens of bullying in the workplace. What is it? How does it feel? And what can organizations do to prevent it? This is a really great episode. Hello, Deitra. I'm so excited that you and I are finally doing this episode.
So am I. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for asking me to join you on your podcast. This is wonderful.
Absolutely. Now, before we dive into the topic, what is one thing that you have done that you never thought you would do?
When I think about that question, it is so difficult for me, and I'll tell you why. For me, I always plan. I put into place goals that I wish to achieve. And so when you ask, what is this something that I may be surprised about that I'm doing? I would say that there's nothing that I'm really surprised about because of the fact that I say, here are some things that I wish to accomplish. And I set goals for myself so that I can accomplish them. So it's not anything that for me that is unexpected. I would probably say that maybe I find myself in the position of maybe starting my business sooner than expected. I've always wanted to start a business, but when my youngest sister passed away unexpectedly, it really hit home to me that tomorrow is not promised. So I began thinking that I need to get my business started, right? So it was the motivating factor of me really getting my business started now because I'm thinking to myself, we know that tomorrow is not promised, so I may not necessarily have the opportunity to start my business. So I think maybe the fact that I've already started the business, even though I've always had plans to get my business started because of my passion for helping others.
Right. That's fabulous. And you started it maybe a little sooner than you were expecting, but that is so wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. And, the theme for the podcast this year is compassionate leadership. And we are going to be talking about a very particular aspect of what goes on in an organization. And we are going to be talking about workplace bullying. So just to get us started, can you have a compassionate workplace and compassionate leaders and still have bullying in the workplace?
No, you cannot. Because if bullying is taking place in the workplace, then your employees are going to see that there is not compassionate leadership because they're allowing it. This is their perspective. If it's happening, then leadership is allowing it to happen. We don't have systems in place to say that we need compassionate leadership, and this is not happening. So it's not throughout the organization in which we see compassion because we're seeing workplace bullying. So, no, you cannot have compassionate leadership and have workplace bullying going on in that organization.
Okay. Well, what is the definition of workplace bullying? I think we all might have an idea, but I'd like to know what you think.
Yeah, as I've read through like a lot of different definitions of workplace bullying is essentially health harming behavior in organizations. Is one or more employees abusing other employees in that organization. So whether the abuse is intimidation, whether it's manipulation, because it takes all forms of bullying. So it can be aggressive, it can be mental abuse, it can be physical abuse. So there's different types of abuse that can transpire when we're talking about workplace bullying. So it's that health harming behavior.
As you are talking about it, I think back to an experience that I had in a workplace and realized there were some bullies and there was some bullying of me and others going on. And I always had this low level frustration that even when I reported it, the response was essentially, well, that's just what that person is like. So it dismissed that I was having a difficult time.
Yes, and that's where you can see when you ask that first question that if someone is telling you that, oh, this is the way in which this person is, we see that there is not compassion, there is not empathy for the employees in that organization. So we don't see that compassionate leadership in the organization if an employee is reporting bullying and is being dismissed. Because anytime someone reports bullying, the response should never be, oh, that's just the way that person is. Because what you're doing is creating an environment that's uncomfortable for that employee to go into every single day. That's why when we're talking about defining workplace bullying, we're saying that it's health harming. It's harming to one's health because if you have to go into an organization every single day and be treated in that manner, then you would not want to come into that organization.
Yes, I sat next to this person every day. Um, and at the time, I didn't have the understanding of how to deal with that. So, as an employee, if you're experiencing something like that, if you are feeling bullied, what are the things that we should do as employees to report it, to get it to stop, to protect ourselves?
That's a great question. And I like the fact that you said you did not have the tools to really address what was happening to you. Because the first thing that I would say is that although you may not have the tools, you should be able to talk to someone and they should be addressing it, right? Someone within that organization. So, one of the things, because sometimes someone may be bullying another person and they may not necessarily know that is considered bullying. So you may want to, if you feel comfortable, addressing that person who is bullying you and let them know that your behavior is making me feel uncomfortable. And I'm going to ask you if, politely, if you can stop that behavior towards me because I just feel uncomfortable. Now, that's only if that employee feels comfortable addressing that bully. right? Because not everyone's going to feel comfortable addressing the bully. And that's perfectly fine, because the only reason I mention that is because that bully may not know that he or she is bullying. They may not know that it's considered bullying. But also, you want to be able to go to human resources and report that behavior and have them look into it. That is so important because organizations should have something in place, a policy that address workplace bullying or civility in the workplace, and they should be looking into it when an employee reports it. So you should be able to feel comfortable going to human resources and letting them know what's happening to you and have them look into it. Also, you want to keep notes, right? Particularly if you've gone to human resources. If they haven't done anything, you can say, I went to human resources on this date to report the bullying that I was experiencing. So make sure you keep accurate notes every time you're being bullied, what time that bully went to you, and whatever that bully did, whether it was abusive conduct, whatever it is. You want to make sure that you keep accurate records of what's going on and what's happening to you, the date, the time. Yes.
You mentioned the workplace having a policy and someone being able to go to HR and report it and having there be a process. And as you were saying that, I realized that is having that policy and having that process is a key piece of having a workplace that is empathetic and compassionate. Because without it, you are leaving it up to the individual employee to manage a problem that they might not be equipped to. And in a group environment, I'm not sure they should have to be the one to manage it.
Absolutely. The employee should not have to be the one to manage it. Now, when we're talking about having a policy, you want to make sure that you're adhering to that policy. It's not just something that you have in the records that we're going to be addressing workplace bullying. But I personally feel like when we're talking about workplace bullying, because this is something that I'm passionate about, this is something that I've researched. I personally feel there should be a zero tolerance when it comes to workplace bullying. And not just say a zero tolerance when we're talking about that policy, but adhering to it. So if someone is bullying, you say, we do not tolerate this, so we're going to have to terminate you. I'm just so passionate about it because of the fact that it is health harming. So what you're doing is you're harming employees' health when it comes to bullying. So that's why I'm so passionate about it being a zero tolerance policy.
I agree. Zero tolerance, that is something I appreciate. That feels like that could be really difficult for some employers because what if the person who's a bully is also a really high performer? And I say that because I had an experience in a workplace where somebody stood 2 inches from my face, screaming at me and spitting on me. And I was told nothing was going to happen to him because he is very important to the organization.
And that's usually what will happen, unfortunately. But on the other side of that, if you're not addressing workplace bullying, then some of your other high performers may leave that organization, because what happens with workplace bullying, it not only harms that person who is being bullied, but it also harms those around you in that organization because feel uncomfortable with what's going on in the organization and they may leave. So you're talking about other high performers potentially leaving that organization because they're feeling uncomfortable with the fact that bullying is not being addressed. So when bullying is not being addressed, employees feel like they're not valued in that organization.
They feel like they're not valued and you don't feel safe. And just speaking from my own experience, then I don't have as much trust for the organization. I don't trust that they're going to have my back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Yeah. There is that lack of trust because it's not being addressed.
I kind of want to go back to this zero tolerance policy because I think there's a lot there that holds someone accountable for their behavior. And I just feel like, are there employers who actually do that? It feels like it could be so fraught. I hear what you're saying, and I agree. If you don't get rid of that person, then you're giving a message to everybody else. I don't know. It just feels even someone who's been bullied and really wish they had gotten rid of the person. It still feels like such a harsh penalty and such a fine line for the employer to have to walk. Because then couldn't that person say you've gotten rid of me unfairly?
Well, why would it be unfairly? If you know what the policy is going into that organization, how can it be unfair?
Yes, I hear what you're saying. If you agree to the policy and there is a zero tolerance policy and you know it, I guess a lot of workplaces just don't have that hard a line when it comes to bullying. I guess that's where the reality is that not very many people hold that line.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think that there are a lot of organizations that have a zero tolerance workplace bullying policy, but also there's not a lot of organizations that have a workplace bullying policy.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So we need to take a few steps back here. Which is-
Yeah, but that's just my perspective. I mean, there's all different ways in which you can integrate some type of workplace bullying policy because you can have three strikes when it comes to workplace bullying if an organization does not want to be that harsh. So, I mean, I think that's probably more of an appropriate type of policy for most employees. You know, once you've been warned, two times, then the third time you're out. So, given that employee a lot of notice about his or her behavior, and if you continue it, then you know what's going to happen. So, I think that's probably what you're saying you feel more comfortable with is probably a more appropriate type of policy to have and in which employees will feel comfortable with.
because I'm thinking back to what we said earlier is what if someone says something and they don't necessarily think of it as bullying and they don't run around the world as a bully, but just do say something that's inappropriate and is bullying. So you wouldn't want to penalize somebody for a mistake versus someone who behaves as a bully.
I think that's where training comes in.
I was just going to ask you about training. What is most important to be as we're training our leaders to make sure that they're paying attention to this issue?
Well, that's where training comes in. You want to have training so that your leaders understand what constitutes workplace bullying, but also have training for your employees as well for the same reason, because not everyone has a good understanding of what workplace bullying actually is. So someone may be bullying another person, another employee in that organization, and may not necessarily know that they're being bullied. Yeah, so that's why training is so important because it will allow leaders as well as employees to understand what constitutes workplace bullying.
I feel like when we promote people to become leaders on their teams, there often is training in the processes and the tasks that their staff has to be doing, what they need to be paying attention to, and maybe less so in some organizations on the people side of it, of how do you manage people? How do you have compassion as you're dealing with people? How do you recognize bullying? What do you do about it? So I wonder if sometimes there are very good intentions, but managers just don't feel they have the tools.
I agree because oftentimes that you will see that when we're talking about the way in which managers are being trained, maybe in systems, maybe, we're talking about technical skills, but not skills in the perspective of people and emotional intelligence, because the research says that the leaders who have emotional intelligence are those who are most effective as leaders. And when we're talking about emotional intelligence, we're talking about someone who has those interpersonal skills, someone who has empathy for someone else, someone who has an understanding of others and their emotions. So that's what we're talking about with emotional intelligence.
I think about workplace, and I believe it's changing, but traditionally it's been this divide between personal life and your work life and your emotions and your supposed non-emotions that you have in the workplace. And I feel like I've had so many conversations recently about how important it is to have emotional intelligence, to have compassion, have that empathy, to treat others as humans. And I feel like we are moving in that direction where we're accepting that people can and should have emotions in the workplace.
I do agree with that. That because we're human beings. And sometimes we cannot always cut off our emotions when we walk into the workplace. So as human beings, that should be expected. But you mentioned, like the compassion for others, but also we're talking about being respectful of others. We walk into the workplace with different ideas, different religions, different ethnicities, like all of these different types of diversities. So we're talking about being respectful to one another as well.
Yes, that's an important foundation for having a workplace where we can all work together and do the thing that we're all together to do, make the product, perform the service, sell the item. As you think about the world of work and bullying and all of these topics that we've been talking about, what is giving you hope these days?
For me, I think what's giving me hope is that I look at people as having the ability to be compassionate, to be understanding, to be respectful, to move into the workplace with civility. So I look at just being a human being, that this is who we can be. But maybe some people may need more training and understanding in how to do this. One of the things that I always say is that we bring into the workplace our experiences, and every single person has a different experience, may not be acceptable to everyone. And that's where training comes in. It's so important for employees to have an understanding of these expectations and not just say, okay, here are the policies, and we expect you to abide by these policies, but provide training. And oftentimes, training is the department that gets the biggest cut.
It's such a conundrum. It's like we know this is important. On an individual level, we know this is important, but on an organizational level, sometimes there's just not that recognition of how important it really is. And that is to the detriment of the organization. And ultimately,
Absolutely. It is to the detriment of the organization. For example, bullying other employees. And as we mentioned earlier, you may have some of these high performing employees leaving. That's going to have an impact on your organization's bottom line, right? So I wonder oftentimes how many organizations are looking at the impact to their bottom line when you have employees leaving or when you have employees calling out sick, when they're really not sick, but they feel uncomfortable going into that organization because they're being bullied.
yes, I believe some organizations have a hard time connecting the behavior to those metrics. And because it's not always a clear cut, it's not always clear cut. So yeah, it is. It's such an interesting topic, and you do such fabulous work in this area, Deitra. We're getting to the end of our time. Can you tell our listeners more about yourself and the work that you do, please?
Oh, absolutely. So I've been an educator for more than 14 years. I was teaching human resource management at the college and university level. So I decided to start my entrepreneurial journey, and I started Fabulous Coaching, Training, and Productions, where I actually do coaching and training. My tagline is Empower, Transform, Achieve, and that's exactly what I do. I empower my clients to transform themselves to achieve their dreams. So I work a lot with women, professional women, with self-confidence, with being successful in the workplace, with self-development. But on the other side of my business, I do training for corporate clients in the area of workplace bullying, emotional intelligence, diversity, and conflict management.
Excellent. And how can our listeners reach you if they want to learn more?
Sure. My website is www.fabulousctp. The CTP stands for Coaching, Training, and Productions.com. So fabulousctp.com. And you can also send an email to me if you wish at info@fabulousctp.com. I'm also out there on social media, Facebook and LinkedIn.
Excellent. I'm going to put links to those in the show notes to make it easier for folks to find you. And Deitra, thank you so much. I really appreciate your perspective on this topic, and this was a wonderful conversation.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. I'm Manya Chilinsky. I help organizations analyze their culture, focusing on building environments where well-being and resilience can thrive. Through this process, we identify areas for growth, develop strategies, and create the necessary changes to build healthier, more supportive organizations. If you're ready to make a change, I'd love to connect. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or your listening platform of choice. It really helps others find us. And if you want to continue the conversation, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit my website, www.manyachilinsky.com. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.